Well, hey there, everybody. Pat and the Seed here, and today is super special. It's super special for a number of reasons. Number one, it's super special because of the guest I have, but it's also super special because you're about to hear from this guest and what it's really like to be in the military and what these guys go through. And we need to learn to honor better than we do in this country. And today I want to speak to a guy that I think is an incredible leader, an incredible, well, passionate person, great author, I got to add as well. His name is Heston Russell. Heston, how are you there?
Good, Pat. Thank you, mate, and thanks for having me on.
No, but it's an honor to have you on. And Heston, for those people that don't know your background and been in Timor, Afghanistan, tell us a little bit about your military background.
For sure. I guess quick summary. I'm a fifth generation veteran, all the way back through to great great granddad in World War One. And I served 16 years, deployments to Timor-Leste, East Timor peacekeeping. And then when I joined the Special Forces, the 2nd Commando Regiment, I deployed to Afghanistan on combat operations 4 times, and then finished with my last deployment to Iraq, supporting the fight against ISIS before discharging in 2019.
Wow. Now, I really believe in our country's, our veterans. Tell us what it's like there. I mean, going to a place like Iraq, we've got all these weak, woke, insipid little journalists out there that want to throw rocks at people like you. Tell us
Yeah.
what it's like out there. I mean, so people can really know what you guys face every single day, and girls.
Yeah, I mean, combat is pretty incredible. At the end of the day, what I will say, having deployed on so much combat, is that we only go to war when diplomacy fails, when politicians fail to do their job. But
Mm,
Australia has the finest men and women in our services and who have served overseas, and I've seen that myself in combat. And it
mm,
really comes down to all the training and preparation that goes into what we do and the people that we fight beside. Most people don't appreciate you deploy over there very justified in the purpose, the national purpose. But when the going gets tough and when the danger gets close, it's actually the people that you're fighting with on your left and right that you're willing to lay down your life for. And
mm,
but combat in particular, really, I guess it's a blessing and a curse. It taught me how beautiful and clear life can be when you're all working together, with that life or death immediate motivation right there in front of you. And then
mm,
how much time we waste on politics and all the rest back home. But
mm,
I guess the biggest devastation for me, Pat, from my time in combat was coming home and truly appreciating how we as a nation have failed to take everyday Australians along the journey of what our servicemen and women do overseas and
mm,
have allowed a gap for journalists with agendas to throw rocks at our
mm,
service personnel, particularly
mm,
our special forces who
mm.
are required to operate in the shadows, not allowed to have a public profile, and allowed things like, these defamation proceedings to be
Yeah.
the measure of some of our actions in combat.
Mm. You know, I a couple of years ago during the pandemic, um, they banned the Anzac Day march, and I got a couple of old diggers down here in the Gold Coast. I said we're going to march on Anzac Day, and I
Yeah,
said I want to see. I want these mongrels to come out and arrest a veteran on Anzac Day. So we marched, and you know what? People lined and they applauded. What's
yeah.
happened to our country, Heston? That
Well,
it's
it's I really, yeah, I really enjoy these conversations, mate, particularly as we lead into Anzac Day. And I usually say some words somewhere on the day, but back in World War One, leading in Anzac Day, the first Anzac Day, we as a nation were what, just over 5 million people, and
mm,
over 10%, I mean, just over 500,000 Australians volunteered to serve during the period of World War One. And,
mm,
at a time where here and now, at a population of 26 or 27 million, we can't get 100,000 people to join. We
crazy.
were once a nation that was just so inspired by purpose that we
Mm,
volunteered to serve and support those overseas. And for all those who have traveled, the true value and testament of our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and women in combat in wartime comes from traveling to those countries, to
mm,
Jerusalem, the charge of the light horse,
yeah.
through to all those battlefields throughout Europe where they still have monuments. And on Anzac Day, give
Mm,
testament to the service of our servicemen and women. Whereas back home, because we never have viscerally had to feel, the impact of war, apart from the bombing of Darwin and a Japanese sub into the Sydney Harbour, we haven't had to feel viscerally the
mm,
need for our defence force. And I really
mm,
think that as generations have moved on and sadly passed on since, World War
mm,
II and Vietnam, you know, those generations that have known the need for our military and who
Mm,
pride and value the service of our
mm,
soldiers are
mm.
being lost to history. And I just fear it might require another great tragedy to bring that reality back.
You know, Heston, what is sad is that in our schools, we have not been teaching our children about the 800 light horsemen that liberated Beersheba. And I
Yeah,
want what Napoleon couldn't do, what the Crusades couldn't do, 800 light horsemen charged, the
yeah.
last military charge. Am I correct in what I'm saying here?
The last charge of the light horse liberating modern day Jerusalem. You're spot on, mate.
Tell them about that, because
Yeah,
people need to know, Heston, that
yeah,
this is why
absolutely.
guys like you went and fought against ISIS, and we import some of this stuff into our country. But
Yeah.
I better cool down
It's
with my blood
fascinating.
pressure.
No, you're right. Yeah, the charge of Beersheba, it's just a great testament to Australian ingenuity. You know,
Mm,
the Turks they were fighting had the old machine guns. We had to wind and crank them down to lower their elevation to engage. And they
mm,
figured, you know, as long as they charged full speed on horseback, they could actually outrun and run underneath the fire of the guns, as opposed to the normal,
mm,
deliberate military tactical movement. You know,
mm,
800 young Australians removed as much heavy equipment as they could and charged on the back of their horses and
mm,
took modern day Jerusalem against odds that were seen insurmountable. You know, it's
mm,
just a testament to the bravery, the courage, the initiative, and ingenuity. And
mm,
again, you know, you go to, I've never been, but you go to modern day Jerusalem, there's, you know, a plaque and a testament to the young men who did that. But
mm.
and the people of that place know that story better than most Australians.
Unbelievable. And,
Yeah,
and I mean, you fought in Afghanistan. You went
yeah,
there. ISIS. They're
yeah.
a nice group of people, aren't they? Heston?
Iraq. That was my last
Yeah.
deployment to Iraq.
Mm,
I often say it was the most justified I've ever felt waging war against a people who just wanted to kill and destroy in the most barbaric ways, women and children and all the rest. And the saddest part for me, Pat, is that most Australians don't know that, you know, during the period of 2015, 14, 15 through to, I think, close to 2020, we deployed Special Forces personnel to this fight against ISIS. And this was
mm.
particularly at a time where, you know, the last 5 years, we've pulled ourselves apart over war crimes allegations and culture reviews from our
Unbelievable.
time in Afghanistan. This
Mm,
happened after that. And the
mm,
Australian public doesn't even know we did it because our
mm,
military leaders and those in political parties haven't stood up to, you know, talk about the good things we've done.
mm,
Instead, they bow their knee to the media agendas and popularity contests in the public.
mm. Ben Roberts-Smith, the most
Yeah.
decorated military man in this country, has been vilified by grubs in the media. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I've had a lot to say on this. For those who don't know, I had my own defamation case against the ABC where they accused me of being a war criminal and I had to take them. I had to personally take out defamation proceedings to take them to the federal court. And I won that at the end of, what was that, 2023. Ben's the
Wow.
same. Ben Roberts-Smith has never been charged as a war criminal, let alone convicted. What he has had to do is take up defamation proceedings because those in the media decided that they wanted to call him a war criminal. And
Mm,
losing his case, a single judge ruled not on evidence beyond reasonable doubt, but on civilian standards in a civil court that the media is allowed to call him a war criminal. This is what
unbelievable.
really grinds my grill. And I met with Dutton and others to try and push. We put together this Veterans Protection Act that needs to
Mm,
call for, you know, all these sanctimonious journalists who love to say that this is about truth, this is about justice. You know, there's the Office of the Special Investigator that's been stood up at a taxpayer expense of around $58 million a year. If these journalists have credible stories of apparent war crimes, they should take them to the authorities where they're investigated and turned into evidence that will meet the threshold to charge and then convict people in a criminal court. But
mm,
what these journalists are doing in the most epic gaslighting campaign, in my opinion, is that they are then just simply meeting the thresholds where they're allowed to do this in a civil court under the defamation laws. So they can
mm,
then go publish books and get away with big titles about their award-winning investigations. But again, Ben has never been charged, let alone convicted. But
mm.
most everyday Australians don't know that. It's the difference between civil prosecution and criminal. Ben has never had to face any criminal proceedings. But in
Wow.
Australia, he, as one of our most decorated veterans, is allowed to be called a war criminal by the media.
Now, there's been a bit of a shift now in regards to that, because that pathetic journalist, now it's come to light with his recordings that he wasn't so, what could we call it, Heston?
Wasn't by his own words, he
His
wasn't
own
so
words.
ethical in his conduct. This
Exactly.
is the incredible thing, Pat. You know, where is the ethical line of conduct within journalism in Australia anymore? It isn't. There is no ethical line. All that they'll simply do is push it until they are checked and held accountable legally.
Mm.
And I often say to people, there are two careers in this country that you need no qualification for, to be a journalist or to be a politician. And the worst part is, mate, particularly
Yeah.
for journalists, there's no ethical standards. There's nothing they have to sign and agree to. If you're a accountant, a doctor, a chippy, a sparky, anyone with a trade, and you were negligent in the performance of your duty, you'd lose your ticket, you'd lose your registration.
Mm.
The
Mm.
journalist, for instance, in my case, I personally sued Mark Willisey and Josh Robertson, as well as the ABC.
Good.
The Federal Court of Australia, found that they had defamed me irresponsibly. The very next day, they are free to, on taxpayer expense, publish a new article. There is no certification, no qualification, no accountability. And what
Mm.
we've learned now is the media in Australia are in this place where we know they don't have integrity, or so many of them practice without integrity. And they also know that there's no real accountability, or if there
Mm.
is, their
Mm.
company is going to pay for it if they get sued for defamation. So
Mm.
where you have people without integrity and there's no accountability, you
Mm.
literally have the inmates running the asylum, and they're getting away with whatever they want and are
Mm.
now free to call people like myself and Ben and others war criminals, as
Mm.
long as they feel they can justify it in a civil court, not to the criminal standard.
Yeah. Heston, I've always had a high regard, love, and affinity with soldiers and men. Matter of fact, the head of my coaching department, David, is a SAS guy, and
Good on him. Love it.
mate, he mentioned you to me, and that's
Oh, look
why
out.
he's a great guy,
Good.
and
Mate,
he,
veterans make incredible Australian citizens. The trajectory
they
that should
do.
see people serve and go on to become excellent everyday Australian citizens
Yep.
is a trajectory that makes me the most frustrating, because instead, out of
Mm.
all this stuff, we have so many veterans too afraid to, particularly the special forces community,
Mm.
removing their service history from their resumes and their CVs and things like that because of the public appetite and agenda that's been
Wow.
driven. That's the saddest part for me, mate. There are incredible men and women out there who are
Unbelievable.
withholding their
Mm.
history because of this stigma that has been generated by those who never even dared to apply for, let alone put on the boots to serve in our shoes.
Mm. These pathetic, weak, insipid, putrid. Oh, I've got a whole bunch of words I got that I could but probably get shut down on. These
Careful now. Yeah,
insipid. I got to be. They live under the freedom which you fought for and provide for them.
I
I
know.
don't get
And
it.
mate, they love to throw back, the freedom of speech and freedom of media. I love it when people throw freedoms at me, having never
Yeah.
had to serve and fight for them. But look, Pat, there's one thing I do know from
Mm.
my own battle with the ABC through to seeing, Nick Mackenzie's voice recording coming out with Ben Robert Smith case, is that
Yeah.
karma comes back around. And I like to say karma
Yeah.
is a bitch and she slaps hard. And it's
She
more
does.
conversations like this, mate, that help turn the tide of the
Mm.
general public, especially coming up to a federal election, mate. These are
Mm.
the conversations people should be having with their local
Yeah.
members or people who want to be elected as the
Mm.
leaders of our tribe.
Yeah. Tell me your take on these two leaders that we got, Dutton and Elmer Fudd. Albanese.
Stop.
Um, every time I look
Mate,
at them,
I don't,
I
yeah,
always, you don't have to comment on the
yeah,
politics of it, but
that's fine. I've met them both in person. I'll
yeah,
comment on the person.
mm,
Back in 2021, when I campaigned for the Royal Commission into Veteran Suicide, I stood at the front of the Parliament, and Albo came up to me with his man makeup ready for the cameras, saying, Heston, you should do a speech. Heston, do a speech. I knew he just wanted to speak to the cameras after me. And
yeah,
what was fascinating for me, he was so willing to use me and referred to me in his speech and all the rest. And then I reached out to him. I've reached out to him at least a dozen times in the last 3 years, particularly post my defamation win against the ABC. And
yeah,
he or his office have not even responded once to one of
um,
those inquiries. So as a person, for me, that is just a political puppet. That is a
yeah,
failed leader. And that is someone I will never stand behind, let alone beside. Peter Dutton, He was defense minister when I was taking on the ABC, and he had an opportunity to release my deployment order when the ABC said this incident happened in June or July 2012, and I wrote to him, and instead he played politics and did not. But having said that, I went and met with him at the start of this year, and he pledged to, one, supporting this Veterans Protection Act that means that any accusations or allegations of war crimes must be before a criminal court, and two, an independent inquiry into the ABC. What I have learned, though, is there's a lot of words and not actions. So, to be honest, mate, leading into this political party, this election, I hope there's more independents and minor parties that get up. I hope there's not a party majority. I hope they have to work together. But as far as the individuals, yeah, there's a lot to be desired in both. And this is my issue, Pat. We've traded leadership for politics in this country, and I think it's time for some real leadership.
I agree with you 100%, Heston. Heston, I teach leadership, written books on leadership as you have. And I've always said to people, leadership is the answer and leadership is the problem. This is a problem I got with a lot of churches, you know, having been an ex-minister. I say to them, you know, so, as is the pulpit, so is the state of the nation.
Yeah.
How important is it right now in our country to have strong leadership with what we're facing, an enemy within us, and make no mistake about Australia, we have an enemy within us that we've imported, and then the enemies outside us. How important is leadership in this day and age?
Massively, mate. The role of a leader is to unite people with purpose, and leadership is the ultimate form of that unification, that unites people through inspiration. And I like to say it's the bonds that form between that people and purpose that form the culture. And, you know, I had to spend 4 years at the Defence Force Academy and Royal Military College before I was allowed to be the leader of 30 people. You know, there's a whole, as you would know, mate, there's a whole science to leadership, and then there's an art. And mate, over the years, I've done podcasts with Tony Abbott, Julia Gillard, and other leaders. And I asked them, you know, what professional development have you had as a leader? You know, and they're like, oh, none. But when you become a politician, you get all this media training. You know, we've lost sight of what is required to lead. You know, not relying on authority, as you know, that's the weakest form of leadership. But true leadership, the art and science of leadership, true planning, working together. You'll even see it in this political campaign, mate. It's not about being the best. It's about tearing each other down. You know, it's if you're good on your own feet, you should be able to push past that and have people gravitate towards your natural leadership, because all the promises in the world mean nothing when the plan changes, when war breaks out, when whatever. And this is what I ask people to do at the local level, at the federal level. Vote for your local member that you want to best represent you and you believe will be the right person if the worst case scenario happens.
Heston, you've written some books and got a leadership program. By the way, if any of you business owners, and there's a lot of you here, you want to get this guy to come and talk to your people, and brilliant, I've seen him on stage, and you've written some great books. Can you tell us a little bit about your books and where we can get them? Because folks, listen to me. Books are so important. I say to people, God sent his son, but he left his book. Books are so important. He did.
I like that. That's good.
He left his book. And,
that's good. Yeah.
And books outlive us. I mean, if you look at my shelf here, I'm a reader. I mean, this is my latest one now called Comrade Prime Minister.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, 42 years investigating Albanese and his communist connections. But Heston, tell us about some of your books. Because I want people to know about this.
Absolutely, mate. So my website, hestonrussell.com, 2 S's, 2 L's, is the key point for everyone to go if they want to buy my book or to book me for a speaking or workshop. But yeah, I've just recently released my memoir. It's called Heston Russell, Forging the Will to Fight. And it's my story and really goes into some really great detail of my military career, special forces selection, combat deployments, the taking and loss of life. It's also my personal journey, you know, sort of discovering myself and identity outside of what I was doing or who I was with, right the way through to really behind the scenes the last 5 years as I've taken on the ABC, you know, walk the halls of Canberra and all the rest. And it's really designed to provide some threads of leadership that I've learned along the way. The original working title was Learning to Lead, but there's definitely a lot more in this from a personal sense. So yeah, hestonrussell.com or hestonrussell.com/book. It's literally just been released in a hard copy and ebook, and I'll record the audio book later on this year.
Great. Now, guys, get on it. We'll put a link in the comments, in the chat. We'll put links everywhere. Get a hold of this book. Let's get behind our veterans, and let's get behind guys like like Heston and guys like Ben Robert Smith, they've paid a price that we got no idea. We've got no idea about. And thanks so much for being with us, Heston. I'd love to have you back on again, and maybe have you come in and speak to one of our crowds live. And I know they'll love you, and they'll actually appreciate what you've done and what you continue to do. Thank you so much.
Love to, Pat. Really appreciate it. And thanks to you and your viewers, and looking forward to chatting more.
Thanks, buddy. Now, folks, don't forget, we have our Money Shield event, and we want to help you increase and prosper. We are living in dark, difficult economic times, and we need a way forward. We really do. This is your chance to win $100,000. $100,000. The consolation prize is $50,000 in education. So one of you is going to walk away with an incredible, incredible opportunity to prosper and increase. 3 days. It goes for about 3 to 4 hours or 4.5 hours a day. This is your chance to grow your income. Listen, they're coming after your assets. They're coming after your super. They're coming after your freedom. If not now, when? Now, it's only $27. It gives you a chance. There's a referral program there if you refer others. This is your opportunity, folks. We've gone out on a limb. We want to help you prosper. The media, the government, and make no mistake about it, regardless of who wins in this election, we're in for a rough ride. $1.2 trillion. That's over $38,000 per person that we owe the globalists. In spite of that, we can prosper. In the darkest times, there can be the greatest of light times. The light shines greater in the darkest moments. So click on that link, get your ticket for the multiple stream of income Money Shield to protect, to prosper, and to progress. This is Pat Mesiti. Click on that link. I want you to win it. I want you to get your family involved. It is a great way to get educated, to learn what the elites don't want you to know, and also to get a chance to win $100,000. It's online. You do this from the comfort of your own home. I look forward to seeing you on our Money Shield multiple streams of income, and I'd love to have you win that $100,000.